From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
The weather was chilly as we set out across the Gulf of Mexico on the first lap of our trip into the interior of Brazil to search for Colonel Fawcett, the lost British explorer who disappeared in 1925. Exciting thoughts racing through my mind must have been responsible for the storm we ran into off Haiti. All hands were ordered on deck, hatches battened down, and as our ship stuck her nose into the storm, huge waves broke over the entire superstructure, drenching even those on the bridge, and nearly washing away the lifeboats. The battle of the elements was reflected in the turmoil of spirit and the wild beating of our hearts as we looked forward in great anticipation to our adventure in the jungles of South America. The storm abated, and soon we were steaming on to Rio de Janeiro. As one enters the harbor of Rio for the first time, a view is unfolded that is perhaps one of the most beautiful in the world. Hills and mountains come down to the very shoreline. A long neck of land curves out into the sea like some jungle serpent, protecting the city inside its grasp. And then appears the most unique landmark in the world, Sugarloaf Mountain. It overlooks the city proper and the famous bathing beach, like some sentinel standing watch over the age-old secrets of a lost race inland. Modern inventions have provided a way for visitors to view Rio from the top of its peak. There's an aerial car hung from cables, and a ride on it is as thrilling as a ride in an aeroplane. The view from the moving car is unsurpassed. Spread out before one's eyes is a panorama that baffles all description. We stopped at the famous Copacabana Hotel while awaiting official government permission to enter the interior, and this soon arrived together with a promise of aid in our quest for news of Colonel Fawcett. General Rondon, Brazil's greatest explorer, spent a great deal of his time pointing out to us the route we should traverse and explaining to us the dangers of Green Hell, the name given the Amazon jungles. General Rondon is the man who, some years ago, guided Theodore Roosevelt to the River of Doubt. And although a full-blooded Indian, he's one of the foremost men politically and socially in Brazil. He had made fairly accurate maps of this territory, and they're the only ones in existence, since the interior of the Amazon has claimed more lives of those attempting to penetrate its forests than any other region in the world. We boarded a little train provided by the authorities to take us part way into the interior. The native element was excited and interested, watching us store various supplies, cameras, and other necessary equipment aboard. They were very curious about the people from North America, who intended to try to penetrate what to them was a forbidden land. Finally, the loading was completed and we started. While the captain played the harmonica to keep up the spirits of our crew, I prepared the first expedition meal inside our private boxcar, in a kaffir pot, which had been with me all over the world. As the train rumbled westward, my thoughts were ever on our adventure. Female warriors who fought beside their men. Would we see any of them? Did they really exist? Would we find Colonel Fawcett? As you can see by this map, our train took us to the Paraguay River. There, a small boat met us and carried us to the city of Caramba, the last outpost of civilization. Caramba is the chief commercial town of Mato Grosso and is without question the most unpleasant place I have ever seen. The Brazilian government is represented by a naval vessel, and immediately on our arrival I was rowed to the ship where I was courteously received by the Brazilian officers. I found them most willing to help us in our plans and in preparations for the trip. which naturally they considered most hazardous. The humming noise in the sky attracted my attention, and on looking up, I was thrilled by the first view of our sturdy plane. A message was put under the deck of the ship telling us to land up the river at the electric plant. The plane, as it landed on the river and taxied to the shore, was watched by the interested citizens of Caramba. I loaded the plane with gas and carefully checked them and all the intricate parts in preparation for the hop early the following morning. We found everything in perfect order. One must be certain about every detail of this kind. An invitation to night on the naval vessel was gladly accepted. We spent a restful night, sleeping strung on deck. Early this morning we left the ship and was carefully checking our supplies so as not overweight, as overweight in us meant disaster. While the end was warming up, I took a lesson in civilization, adjusted my clothes, and set myself comfortably for a long, hard journey. And I wondered what I'd find at the end. A breath of wind to midstream. It is the hour of dawn. We tacked the current, and then the takeoff. We went the river, thrust down. The specter of overturns itself before the eyes. We'll make it. A breathtaking ship breaks away without a bump. Up we go. Hooray! In the air. The below like tapestry. Paraguay rushing like a silk ever to an unknown land and turning into shapes. We'll never lose. We're north according to the instrument book, trying to pick out marks of which Jim told us. Hope is to identify everything in this net. He turns at the other operator. Ahead of us, a cloud, which when entered, completely blotted out the sky above and the high mountain, the view. And then we saw the greater lake, North America. Forced landing. Looked like a huge mass of wet. Caramba, we like any living creation. This green the land to the jungle of a native village. We banked a sign of a woman glancing, so it was to describe. Over probably our own safe land to take a food there. All the I think of the ship looking north. As we landed and came toward them, the natives ran in fright from the village, seeking the protection of the jungle. To allay their fears and to show them that we were friends, I took some mirrors which we'd brought along with us and placed them on a fallen tree trunk. I felt sure that their natural curiosity would bring them out to investigate. I then climbed a tree to watch developments. I'd hardly got set when I saw one of the natives sneak out of the woods and come toward the mirrors on the tree trunk. He looked around for a moment, grabbed one, and scooted back to his hiding place. 3 days later, when the excitement of our arrival in the monster of the air had subsided, the chief, medicine man, and all the warriors assembled in front of a large community hut to greet us. We found the natives simple-minded and not the ferocious savages we'd been led to expect. And after passing around various presents, we were accepted as friends. While I was making friends with the chief by giving him ropes of tobacco, Captain Wanderwell was having a great time with the native women by removing his false teeth. The only time these people see teeth removed is when as children the front ones are knocked out. This is done to prevent attacks of lockjaw, an epidemic of which had broken out years ago and taken the lives of many of the natives. A great feast in our honor was ordered by the chief. Baskets of grain were brought into the village by the women, who incidentally do most of the work. This grain is one of the chief articles of diet among the natives, and is the only thing which they even in a small way make pretense of cultivating. The grain is placed in large wooden mortars, and the women spend hours pounding it with heavy hardwood poles. These weigh from 30 to 40 pounds. Note the muscular development of these women. All physical and no mental work is their creed. These natives are living some 10,000 years behind our time, and in an absolutely primitive manner. After pounding the grain, it's placed in wicker trays and winnowed by tossing it up and down, after which it is fanned to remove the chaff. While such preparations for the feast were going on, everyone was being made ready for the dance, which always preceded a ceremonial banquet. I, too, was to take part in this ordeal, so 2 warriors came and proceeded to make me up likewise. Soon the orchestra struck up, and the natives started dancing. The music was most weird. It was produced by blowing on gourds and hooting through the hands. It echoed everywhere. Occasionally could be heard a native voice chanting incantations to the evil gods. These people believe that they must appease the evil gods so the good gods will not harm them. As I sat and watched the savages continue their hopping and chanting and listened to the eerie music, I could hardly believe that the scene before me could be part of this world. This terrible exercise kept up for hours. Two warriors were out on the river to catch fish for the feast, using nets made from twisted strands of vines. They only dare go into rivers and streams where there's a swift running current, because in most of them lurk the terror of Brazilian waters, the flesh-eating piranhas. These are probably the fiercest alive, savage little things barely 7 inches in length. They travel in schools of 1,000 or more. and one piranha can bite out a piece a half-inch deep and a half-inch wide. It doesn't take many bites from a group of these man-eaters to produce disastrous results. Still, the dancing kept on, the natives hopping up and down, the weird, hollow sounds of the music growing wilder. A nice fat peccary, or South American wild pig. And soon the pig was on his way to the banquet. As the dancing kept on, I was beginning to wonder if all wouldn't drop from exhaustion, but they kept right on dancing. Some would drop out and others would take their places. Finally, the excitement grew so intense that I, too, was forced to join in the mad jamboree. I later suffered greatly from such unusual exercise, but there was no stopping. Hop, hop, on with the dance. Time, I was eliminated by sheer exhaustion and left in a state of mind and body certainly not adapted to feasting. These natives, in much the same manner as other primitive tribes, create fire by twirling a hardwood stick against soft pulpwood, the friction producing the fire. Everything was being brought in for the feast, while the medicine man chanted evil spirits away from the cooking. The huge pot is made of baked clay and can be used in the same manner as our metal pots. Even the dog was interested in the culinary preparations. The table manners were not of the best, the natives dipping their food out of a common dish, using shells for spoons. There were also some uninvited guests, king vultures, who hovered at the edge of the village awaiting their turn to attack the remains of the feast. For dessert, we had papayas, a fruit which grows in the jungle in great profusion. As the gas tank in the plane was empty, we decided that one of us would have to make the trip down the river for a new supply. The chief agreed to send one of his warriors with either the captain or myself, and ordered some of his men to build a new and especially strong canoe in which to make the trip. There were many dangerous rapids along the way, and it would take strong construction and clever maneuvering to navigate them. I had taken every opportunity when talking to the natives to find out if they had any information regarding Colonel Fawcett, but none of them were able to help us in any way. It was rather difficult to converse as we had to depend almost entirely on the sign language. Finally, everything was in readiness for the trip, and the captain took his place in the canoe and waved goodbye. And so he left us for his hazardous journey down the River of Death, a trip which had taken us 8 hours by plane, would take 6 weeks by canoe and return by motorboat. One of the interesting pictures I took while Captain Wanderwell was on his trip to get a supply of gas was this one of a child learning the tribal dance. Children are not so numerous among these people as they are in other native settlements. Here, the medicine man discourages the raising of children, preferring to have the race die out rather than to be subjected to civilization and the consequent loss of his prestige and power. In the early days, the rubber planters captured many of these Indians and put them under bonds of slavery. This fact has gradually driven these primitive people far into the jungle to prevent others of their people being forced into slavery. The ornaments you see are made by clever craftsmen from the teeth of animals bound together with strips of palm. The larger ones are made from the huge claws of the ant bear, glued together with a peculiar pitch found on certain trees. Here's an amusing photo of a group of village housewives. The one in the foreground has a tame macaw, which is brilliantly colored. Notice how intently they watch the camera, never letting their eyes leave it for a second. They call it the evil box of the little eye, and they probably would not have been surprised if some evil spirit had sprung out of it at any time. Down at the river, some of the men were disporting themselves in the water like schoolboys on a holiday. Some preferred a little creek. It reminded me of the old swimming hole. And believe me, there were several Johnny Weissmullers among them. One day I took a canoe and started down the river. I paddled downstream through a veritable Garden of Eden. Deep, clear water, banded by beautiful water lilies. Gorgeous green trees skirted the shore, through which I could glimpse brilliantly colored birds. On a limb of a tree, Mr. and Mrs. Parrot chattered, while nearby a marabou stork strutted in all his imperial glory. The whole section seemed bustling with animal life. Here's a honey bear playing with the stork's egg. Through a clearing there appeared a little striped fawn, and as I was wondering whether she was a little orphan, I saw the mother doe, ears forward as if scenting danger. And further along I saw the reason for her fears, a cougar, or South American lion, skulking through the underbrush. Two little herons had climbed a tree, evidently to escape the selfsame fate. Turning about, I rapidly paddled back to safety, and as I landed, I spied a jeraboo crane hunting for fish on the riverbank. On a shallow bank, the women were bathing. The steaming heat of the jungle was sufficient excuse for me to join them, unaware that nearby lurked one of the many dangers of green hell, the crocodile, called by the natives yakari. The water wasn't deep, but what there was of it was very cool and soothing to my sun-blistered skin. On a mud bank, not 20 yards away from us, was a knobby, gray-green reptile. It didn't take me long to leave after seeing Mr. Croc, but the native women seemed to take it as a matter of course. It slowly started to swim toward us. Its eyes were glassy and half-closed, and its expression as wicked as a monkish gargoyle. He evidently had the thought that a meal of white meat would be a change from the usual dark. A long time before the actual arrival of the outboard motorboat bringing Captain Wanderwell back with the gas for the plane, the natives seemed conscious of his coming. I was relieved to see Captain Wanderwell back safe with the fuel for our return journey, but I must confess I felt a twinge of regret as I realized I was soon to leave without finding any trace of Colonel Fawcett. As a farewell gesture of friendship, the chief decided to perform a tribal dance, performed by the men only. All the native women were excluded even from watching it. All the men are decorated by their womenfolk. The girls pluck the eyebrows of the men and groom them most completely. I was to be permitted to remain in the arena during the dance and watch the proceedings. This was really very unusual, because no woman is ever allowed to be present in any of these affairs. I loaned one young lady my comb with which to dress her husband's hair. Special decorative effects are placed on the faces of the chief and the medicine man. They then don their most elaborate headdresses of aigrette and crane feathers. The music for this dance is contributed by the medicine man himself, who yells into a large gourd. All is soon ready for the exhibition. The chief, taking his place, squatted on a blanket, whence he will review the dance. The dance of the warriors is about to begin. Slowly the native men file out in a long line, passing the chief as if for an inspection review. The natives crouch, waiting for the signal to begin their jumping and hopping. The medicine man begins his weird music, and as the queer rhythm breaks on the air, the men go into their strange dance. The heat is terrific, the men cooling themselves by pouring cool water from the river over their perspiring bodies. Two had danced themselves into a frenzy, and the medicine man said they were possessed by the evil spirit. They must die by fire. We were able to convince the chief that they were just mentally exhilarated and would no doubt be all right by morning. He agreed to wait, but placed a guard of warriors about the hut containing the two men. But the guards themselves, exhausted from their strenuous dance, were soon asleep. I too fell asleep, only to be awakened by wild and blood-curdling yells. Hurriedly arising, I looked out of my hut and saw the big community hut in flames. I thought at first we'd been attacked by another tribe, and then discovered it was the guard fighting with other natives. Not wanting to interfere, I stayed where I was. The next day, I searched among the ruins to see if the men had died in the flames. I could find no trace of their remains, so came to the conclusion that they had escaped in time. I decided to ask no questions, as they might well resent any outside interference. The following morning, we prepared to say goodbye. We loaded the gasoline on our ship and carefully checked every part of the engine and struts. We realized that we had a dangerous section of the country to traverse, and if we were compelled to make a forced landing, it would mean almost certain death. One of the minor chiefs came with his wives, bringing us crocodile skins as a present. These were the only natives who could be induced to come near the plane. And so, disappointed that we had learned nothing regarding Colonel Fawcett, we left this land of mystery, of beauty, and of danger, a paradise untouched by civilization. Au revoir. We'll come back again someday.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.